Hi, and welcome to Leadership and Lattes. I'm Bill Montgomery, and we're here at Cohatch at Polaris, and I'm with my good friend Rye D'Orazio. Rye is the executive director of the Central Ohio Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we've known each other for a couple years, haven't we?
Just a few, Bill. I mean, probably in the late 90s, was it?
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
I think it was. Rye and I were on the board of FCA together. He was running his own company at that time, an entrepreneur in the IT space. He's done a lot of different things, and he did such a good job. He became our board chair that eventually we made him sell his company and become the executive director.
Yeah, it's kind of a slide thing you got going there, right? That's how God works, right?
It really does. You kind of just go, well, what's my next assignment, and that's what you got to do.
Yeah, that is it. That is it for sure.
So, well, let's talk a little bit today. As we're trying to do on this show, as we're talking about leadership, is really figure out what are some key characteristics or leadership traits that, you know, those that are trying to hone their leadership skills can learn. And what to you is one of the key leadership traits that you've seen in business, in ministry, in life that you think is the most important?
Yeah, Bill, first, it's great to be on this, so I appreciate you doing that, and I like the focus, too, so this is good. You know, the first one that comes to mind when you even asked me that was I would call the art of communication. My father used to say this: communication at its best is poor. Yeah, we are in the construction business, we're cement finishers, right? And the stakes are high for not communicating right. Because you measure, you do it, and the next day it's like they say, it's in stone, and you find out if you communicated right or not. It's 2 feet, 1 feet, whatever the issue was. And so we learned from an early stage on that the art of communication is really the foundation of relationships with customers, with family, if you're leading people, any of those type of things. The foundation, communication is really what I think is the foundation of leadership, because you have to be able to communicate to be a leader. And so here's what I say communication is. Communication is when people understand what you're saying, they value it, and then they act upon it.
Boy,
that's really what I feel on when communication really takes place.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know when our team at the radio station where I lead was working on our core values, and we've got 4, but one of the pillars of that was communication for all the reasons that you said. I mean, we're in media, we're in the communication business, but the reality of it is, everybody is in the communication business if you want to get your word out, if you want to get your message across, internally, externally. It's so critical.
And you think about it, it's at every level of life like we talked about. So it doesn't matter if you're talking on the big scale, vision, mission, right? Or you're one-on-one and into the trenches somewhere in your business or obviously in your family relationships. It doesn't matter if you're in a civic community, doesn't matter if you're in a marketplace, doesn't matter if you're in ministry like we are, right? But you're still running it. Communication is the foundation. And so that's a big one. You know, some of the elements of communication that you would say, number one, it's clarity. So clarity and common ground foster communication. And so you can understand how you want to act on something. So John Stone Street from Colson Center.
Yes, I've heard
Ministries. He was the CEO at the time when he said this. He says, it's no good having the same vocabulary if we're using a different dictionary. Now, he was commenting in the book, he was being quoted in the book, Social Justice is Not Biblical Justice. And so today, you got to get on common ground and get clarity, not even necessarily agreement, but so that communication can start to take place. You have to have a common understanding of what the words even mean. You know, in our society today, they redefine words. Or we are all shaped by, when we hear words, by what our culture was when we grew up and how we process those words. They're just different to different people, different generations, different cultures. So that's, I think, is one thing to have that understanding, is to get clarity and get on common ground.
That's good. We say in our company a lot, and I love this phrase, that clarity is kindness. Because if you're not clear with what you're talking about, or if you're talking across one another, you're not listening to understand, you're not being understood. And so, yeah, it sounds like that part of getting the definitions out up front is so critical.
It is, in our business world, go to that world, our people did what we did, a status report every day. Now, we're professionals in the technology business at the time, and we did engineering and development for huge deployments for Fortune 200 companies. Every day, everybody did a status report. Think about the clarity that they get. Were there any issues to deal with? Is there anything that needs to be escalated? The next thing down is, okay, what did we do today? Second thing is, what do we plan to do next day? So our clients at any time could have a snapshot into any one of a particular project that's going on. And of course, then there's a weekly update in person. Now, we didn't just rely upon that, because if there are issues, you got to call the person and look them in the eye and communicate with them. You don't just put it in media today. So there's all kind of forms of communication. It needs to be written. You need to be able to be one-on-one, just like we're doing right here. And there needs to be messaging is all part of the communication. So, being able to be on common ground like that and facilitating, I think, is very, very important in getting that clarity.
I love what you said there, that there's different types of communication. Could you maybe unpack, sometimes communication is the one-on-one verbal, sometimes it's across to a team, sometimes it's a text message or a phone call. Do you find there are different appropriate strategies for when to use which one?
Absolutely. Because again, you need to, we'll get to that a little bit, you need to know who your audience is and who they are in particular. Because you send me a text message. The text message is right here. Hey, I'm running 10 minutes late for the shoot. Yeah. That's it. Not a text message for relationship wise and things like that.
Yeah.
And so you have to know who your audience is. So I think it's absolutely it's a different media. Know who they are, where they hang out at, what does that mean to them, what's important to them, how do they like to be communicated. So part of the communication is asking questions. So, be slow to speak. We heard that. Quick to listen, slow to speak, right? Slow to anger, right? Yeah, we know that from the Word of God.
I know. I think James tells us that.
Yeah. So you need to be inquiring and asking questions and understand how the people you're trying to communicate to, how they process things.
Being a leader means celebrating the people who make it all happen. Dolce Sweets makes it easy with handcrafted chocolates and nostalgic candies that inspire connection and frankly make people feel loved and cared for. Right now, Leadership and Lattes listeners get 20% off a trio bundle, perfect for showing appreciation or enjoying yourself. Use the code BILL20 at dolcesweets.com to claim your special discount today. It's Dolce, D-U-L-C-I, Sweets. The finest chocolate you have ever had.
Don't assign motives to their behavior, because maybe we just don't know how they respond and process the things. So I call it the QTL. What's your QTL scale? Think of us as if you had cholesterol. We have all these things, blood sugar. Right. Yeah. Think of your quick to listen scale, your slow to speak, slow to anger scale. Right. What are you doing on that? We go in so much of communications. It's about us and our agenda, what we want to communicate. But just think about if you took the time to understand who the person was, how they like to be communicated to, and that's on a big audience too. Who's your audience? Yeah. How do they receive things? What's the message you're trying to get across? So that was just one of the things I think that, besides the clarity and getting on common ground, is be able to ask questions. Pause, ask some questions of the people, understand before you just think, that's how they process things. Even with our donors, if I'm on my game, I'm going to ask, how do you like to be communicated with, Bill, primarily? How do we like to touch base with you? What kind of information do you like? How often? What's good to you? And you might say, hey, what is good to you?
Yeah.
If I asked you that, what would you say? You might say, yeah, just shoot me a text.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Well, there's some of our donors, there's no way. Shoot them a text. They don't hang out in that world.
It's funny, our donor director a number of years ago reached out to one of our donors and shot him a text with a question about a gift that he might want to give. And all of a sudden, his phone rang, and it was that donor, and he said, "We don't do this over text." And it's exactly what you said. he was very gracious in that. And he said, you want to talk about my money? You know, you want to talk about that? And I love your ministry. We need to have a conversation. And I'm not just going to text that. Or he has other people that they were just, a text was the quickest way. And so, as you said, know who your audience is. And it might be who your broad audience is, but it might be what each individual wants, and figuring out, hey, with this employee or with this donor or with this partner, I've got to communicate this way. And with somebody else, it's funny, I teach a class at a local college, and one of the things I tell them, because I know generationally we even communicate very differently. Yes. You guys you're working with adults, you're working with coaches, you're working with college students, you're working with high school and middle school students, and we all have different modes and methods of communication. But I told these students, I said, sometimes you're going to have to pick up the phone and use it to call somebody. I said, I know you think it's just text and stuff, but you may have to actually talk to somebody.
That's right. That's good. And to understand that, because that transcends across all life and everything we do, is really understand that.
Oh, for sure.
And, that leads right into, if you think about it, another key element is going to be feedback. So you master the art of asking questions, master the art of getting feedback. My brother, who is one of the CIOs of one of the large American companies, said this: feedback is a gift. When you get a gift, what do you say?
You say, thank you.
And sometimes that gift doesn't come wrapped so well.
Wow.
It might be a customer complaining. My granddaughter worked on the help desk at a major financial firm, her first job. So she's working hand in hand with the customers. I said, you're never going to be closer to the customers in your entire life in your organization as you taking those calls every day. Find out who the people are. And what she discovered, the financial market went down, but really the client's daughter just had a major sickness and was in the hospital. Oh, wow. Just by asking questions, how are you doing today? What's going on? Oh. And so that was just the thing that she took that to heart, to really find out about the people, where they're at, where they're coming from, and ask for the feedback, solicit feedback, and give it. Be open with your feedback. Again, don't hold that back. If you don't understand, ask a question. Get the feedback from people, and it's a gift. It is a gift. Now we can. It's our responsibility then to do something with that.
Well, that's good. And so I would imagine if somebody is giving you the gift of feedback, even how you receive that, even if you don't like it, is pretty critical.
It's huge. That is number one. You have to be in a spirit of not taking it personally. It's just an issue. And don't attack that person. And like we said, don't assign motives of their behavior. Who knows what happened to them that day?
Yeah.
Right? And it's a legit thing. A lot of times there's a foundation for the complaint, even if it comes maybe not as escalated as that person thinks it is. A police officer said this to me, my dear friend John Petrozzi. He says, when I go on a call, the people that call me, that's the most important thing in their life that time right there when I step onto their property.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Boy, that changed my whole thinking. He says, yeah, that is the most important thing to them. That. So when customers and or family or donors, whatever it is, are providing you feedback, that's very important to them. And we need to receive it with the right spirit.
Yeah.
100%. And my dad calls it the music.
Oh, I love that.
So
unpack that a little.
Yeah. So what we say to people, it's, all these things are great. If you don't have the right music, it doesn't matter anyway. You have to have the right music, accepting, loving, really valuing who the person is. Even if you totally disagree with them, that doesn't have nothing. He could look in your eyes and he'd say, son, I'm going to have to disagree with you. But he'd go, I love you. Or he'd say, son, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. That's after he gets to know you a little bit better. And of course, we got this.
Yeah, you get a little different when it's dad to son.
But the idea is his music was always loving and accepting. So people felt very comfortable. That type of thing fosters communication. And he could speak truth into people. It wasn't like he didn't disagree. In fact, just quite the opposite a lot of times. But because he had that right spirit you talked about, that music, he called it. My music's so loud I can't hear your words. How about that? So think about that. They're looking at the music, and the words might not be perfect, or the words could be absolutely perfect, but your spirit is just not there at all. So it's one of the foundations that really is, I should probably start with that. Get your music right.
Man, that's so kind of going into, especially maybe a hard conversation with, okay, I've got it. What's the right musical tone I need to set for this hard conversation, whether I'm giving it or whether I'm receiving it, and make sure that I'm in a position, which kind of goes back to that, where's my slow to speak number? Is it so that I can hear and understand? And I love what you said. I don't have to agree with somebody to take their feedback well.
That's correct. That's correct. In fact, it might be just the opposite.
Yeah.
And then are they in a position then to hear the feedback you have? Not the right spirit, they're not. Early days of technology, we were blessed to be on the cutting edge, front edge of all this distributed computing and new technology, email. We did a study at Wright State. How's email going to impact personal relationships? So people, I send something in all caps, they think I'm yelling at them. They don't know I'm a dyslexic, can't type. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go retype that. I'm mad at anybody. I'm having fun. I'm trying to even be funny. Yeah. Their spirit they're in, they just had an argument with somebody. They see my all caps, right? And they're all, man, that's why what you said before, pick up the phone, right? When it's critical things, you don't do that. So I want them to hear the music. I'm lighthearted, or, hey, no, Bill, we need to have a serious conversation about that. Either way, it's a good thing. No, this isn't lighthearted. Or, hey, hey, Bill, I just wanted to chat with you about that. Hey, how about this term? I was a potato head about that. And you say, oh, okay, I get it. All right, that's the idea. So, so those things, I think, communication, mastering the art of communication. And in our business, I said, the concrete business, the stakes were high. Because most of our people were blue-collar workers out of the steel mills, right? They saved up cash to put in a new driveway. And you think about that, you're not going to replace it, or we replace it. Yeah. But, in our world, in FCA, it's for eternity. The stakes are ultimately high. It's the ultimate stakes high. So if we're not good communicators and we don't have that right spirit, just think about the stakes that someone that may not take a negative tune or tune us out with the beautiful word of God that we may have, because our music's so bad, they don't even get to hear the words.
That's powerful. That's powerful. As we're wrapping up here today, if somebody is trying to improve their communication skills, any things, any tools, any books, what would you recommend as a great next step for somebody that's just trying to get better at their communication?
Number one, I would say adopt some of these things. Is start with adopting a few of these things that we chatted about, and get your mindset right first. People aren't your enemies, right? So work on your mindset of what you're trying to get done first. Start with that. I'm going to just be quick to listen and pause before I speak, before I respond. And I would say there's actually classes that you can get, like communication schools, that just teach some of these basic things. That's what FCA sent me to a communication class. Even though I've done this all my life, ran businesses and things like that. It was amazing, because I had to change. Because remember, all the audiences we had to communicate, right? There's all those audiences you mentioned. I had to learn how they think and what they're at. So I'd say study your audience too. Ask questions. Study your audience of who you're trying to communicate to, and ask them the questions. What's the best way to communicate to you? And I think that you'll go farther on the one-on-one, on your big mission vision, right? Yeah. Just obviously clarity and repetition. There's only one person that spoke things into existence. If I wish as a business leader, I could just publish here, and that was it, right?
Yes.
So, when it's those type of communications, it's got to be repetition, 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 because people are only going to understand things relative to where they're coming from and where they're living life that day. So those two things, I think, could just be conscious of it, getting the right mindset.
Yeah, that's good. It reminds me of I think it's John Maxwell, maybe John or Zig Ziglar. I get some of their stuff confused, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Amen.
And so that communication has to communicate some caring.
Big time
in there. That's good, and that's a big deal. Right, great stuff today. Thank you for being on the podcast. I'm encouraged by your friendship, and I think you're a great communicator, and you model it well for the community and for your people, and I just appreciate it.
All right, brother. Always. It's a pleasure. That would be an honor. Thanks for what you're doing, buddy.
Yep. Thank you, my friend.
God bless.
Yeah.